Gastrointestinal Tract Part 2. The objective: to know the parts of the esophagus, the blood supply of each part and anatomical relation, to know some clinical problem. Esophagus runs from the pharynx to the stomach and it's about 25 centimeters in length, conduct food by peristalsis, which is meaning that a rhythmic contraction or squeezing, the contraction of the circular muscle above the food and then the contraction of longitudinal muscle below the food. The esophagus is posterior to the larynx and trachea in the neck region and upper thoracic region. It travels on the right side of the descending aorta, passing through the diaphragm and connect to the stomach. There are also inner circular and outer longitudinal muscle. The upper third of the esophagus muscle are voluntary. The middle third mixed. The lower third is a smooth muscle involuntary. Esophagus junction is located approximately at the level of the diaphragm. Contraction of the diaphragm creates sphincter-like effect which prevent the reflux, يعني رجوع الفود, from the stomach to the esophagus. It's not anatomical sphincter, but it is we call physiological sphincter. This will be discussed in the later slides. This shows you the contraction and mechanism of the swallowing. The esophagus. The esophagus runs in three parts: neck part, thoracic part, abdominal part. The esophagus is a muscular tube about 25 centimeters in length and about 10 inches extend from the pharynx to the stomach. It begins at the level of the sixth cervical vertebra at the level of the cricoid cartilage. It commences in the midline, but as it descends through the neck, it inclines to the left side and passes through the diaphragm at the level and penetrate the diaphragm at the level of 10th thoracic vertebra to join the stomach. The relation of the esophagus in the neck: anteriorly trachea, recurrent laryngeal nerve, and one on each side, in groove between the trachea and esophagus. Posterior relation: the prevertebral layer of the deep cervical fascia and the muscle longus colli, and the vertebral column later. Laterally on each side is the lobe of the thyroid gland and cricoid and the carotid sheath. Blood supply in the neck. The artery of the supply the esophagus in the neck are derived from the inferior thyroid artery. The vein drain into inferior thyroid vein, then into brachiocephalic trunk. Lymphatic drainage of the esophagus in the neck region. The lymphatic vessel drain into deep cervical lymph node. The nerve supply in the neck is derived from the recurrent laryngeal nerve and the sympathetic trunk. This X-ray show you the inner wall of the esophagus and the lower end of the esophageal junction. And this examination or investigation called barium swallow. That means we are going to take this picture during the swallowing of the barium material through the esophageal wall. This will show you the inner characteristic feature of the esophageal wall, mid over to the midline. The relation of the thoracic part of the esophagus from above downward are as follows. Anteriorly, trachea and the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. The left principal bronchus, which constrict the esophagus, the pericardium, which separate the esophagus from the left atrium. Posteriorly, from above downwards, the body of the thoracic vertebra, thoracic duct, zygous vein, the right posterior intercostal artery, and its lower end descending, and the lower end the descending thoracic aorta. The right side, the mediastinal pleura, right side mediastinal pleura, and the terminal part of the zygous vein. The left side, the left subclavian artery, aortic arch, thoracic duct, and mediastinal pleura. Inferiorly to the level of the root of the lung, the vagus nerve leave the pulmonary plexus and join with the sympathetic nerve to the esophageal plexus. The left vagus lie anterior to the esophagus, the right vagus lie posterior. At the opening of the diaphragm, the esophagus accompanied by these two vagi branches. The blood supply. The branches of the left gastric artery, lymphatic vessel, fiber from the right class of the diaphragm, and the lymphatic vessel. The blood supply of the left gastric artery with lymphatic vessel. But fiber from the diaphragmatic cross, right cross, pass around the esophagus and they form a ring. This ring will act what we call it as physiological ring, prevent the regurgitation of food from the stomach to the esophagus. The blood supply. Upper third of the esophagus supplied by inferior thyroid artery, middle third supplied by descending thoracic arteries, while the lower third supplied by left gastric artery. The venous drainage from the upper third drain into inferior thyroid vein, the middle to the middle part or middle third into zygous, the lower third into left gastric vein, and then to the portal vein. Lymphatic vessel. The upper third of the esophagus is drained to the deep cervical lymph node, while the middle third into superior and posterior mediastinum. The lower third passing along the left gastric blood vessel and the celiac cord. The nerve supply of the esophagus is supplied by parasympathetic fiber and sympathetic fiber, efferent and infrared fiber by the vagus and sympathetic joint. In the lower part of its thoracic course, the esophagus is surrounded by esophageal nerve plexus. The abdominal portion in the abdomen of the esophagus is about a half inch and about 1-3 centimeter inlet enter the stomach. It's related to the left lobe of the liver anteriorly and left cross of the diaphragm posteriorly. The esophagus enters the abdomen through the opening in the right crus of the diaphragm at the level of 10 thoracic vertebrae. It is deeply placed, lying behind the left lobe of the liver. It enters the stomach on its right side. The esophagus is related anterior to the posterior surface of the left lobe liver, posterior to the left crus of the diaphragm. The left and right vagi lie on its anterior and posterior surface respectively. The esophagus, number one, the abdominal part, the blood supply by branching from the left gastric artery, the venous, the left gastric vein, extrabuterary. The portal, the nerve supply is by the anterior and posterior gastric nerve, which are vagus, and sympathetic branches of the thoracic part of the sympathetic trunk. The function of the esophagus conduct the food from the pharynx into the stomach, wave-like contraction called peristalsis, propelling the food inward. In the esophagus, at the lower portion of the abdominal portion, there is what we call the gastroesophageal sphincter. It's not anatomical sphincter at the lower end of the esophagus. They are circular muscle derived from the right crus, serve as physiological sphincter. So the food descends through the esophagus, relaxation of the muscle and the lower occur, then the peristaltic wave so that the food enters the stomach. The tonic contraction of the sphincter will prevent the regurgitation of the food from the stomach to the esophagus. This figure shows you the circular muscle which is right at the lower end of the circular, which is part of the right crus. And we saw that the blood vessel of the esophagus, the left gastric artery. The closure of the sphincter is under vagal control, and it can be augmented by hormones. ممكن إنه يكون تنسيق السفنكتر opening يعني الفتحة مالته والغلقة يكون by hormones. These hormones are gastrin, and reduced by the response to secretin, cholecystokinin, and glycogen. What are the clinical correlation or clinical problems in this subject? First of all, there are certain narrowing areas in the esophagus. Number one, at the side or at the beginning behind the cricoid cartilage of the larynx. Cricoesophageal sphincter. Second, when the left bronchus crosses the esophagus. Third, when the arch of the aorta crosses the front of the esophagus and the esophagus enters the stomach, but its three sides. These sides may offer the resistance of the passage of food down to the esophagus, the esophageal sphincter, and the stomach. Some clinical problems of achalasia of the cardiac esophageal gastric junction. The cause of achalasia is unknown, but it's associated with degeneration of the parasympathetic plexus or plexus in the wall of the esophagus. The primary site of the may be in the innervation of the cardio-esophageal sphincter by vagus nerve. Dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing, and the regulation are common symptoms that are later accompanied by proximal dilatation and distal narrowing of the esophagus. Another problem is a bleeding esophageal valves. At the lower third of the esophagus is an important portal systemic venous anastomosis where the esophageal tributaries of the left gastric vein which drain into portal vein anastomose with the esophageal tributary of the zygous vein, which are asystemic veins. But when there is a portal vein become obstructed, or for example liver cirrhosis, portal hypertension develop, resulting in the dilatation and varicosity of the portal system anastomosis, especially at the lower end of the esophagus. This was called varicose esophageal or esophageal varices. Vein may be dilated till being ruptured. This will cause severe vomiting of blood, which called the hematemesis. The anatomy of the insertion of the Sting-Stachyon tube is a Blackmore balloon for this purpose, to prevent bleeding. Sting-Stachyon tube is a balloon which is used for controlling the massive esophageal hemorrhage from the esophageal varices. The gastric balloon anchor the tube against the esophageal gastric junction. At the esophageal balloon occluded, the esophageal varices may be counter pressure or be pressed so that bleeding will be stopped. The tube is inserted through the nose or maybe oral route. Lubricate the tube is passed down into the stomach and the gastric balloon is inflated. In the average adult, the distance between the external opening of the orifice and the nose and the stomach are about 17.2 inches or 24 or 44 centimeters. The distance between the incisor teeth and the stomach is about 16 inches or 41 cm. This figure shows you the distance variation from the lips or from the canine, so you can know about these distance. Difficulty, the anatomical complication. True, this will be difficult in passing the tube through the nose, damage to the esophageal from overflating of the esophageal tube, pressure on a neighbor mediastinal structure to the esophagus, persistent hiccup caused by irritation of the diaphragm by the distended esophageal and irritation of the stomach by the blood will cause hiccup. This is some different esophageal atresia and tracheoesophageal fistula, which causing different anatomical variation. And thank you for your listening.